In a justice system where power too often insulates itself from consequence and accountability, feels more myth than mandate, the courtroom clash between Judge Howard Gates and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett delivered a seismic shock. What began as a routine hearing spiraled into a public reckoning, exposing corruption at the highest level and challenging the illusion of judicial untouchability. Crockett, a former defense attorney turned fearless public servant, entered the courtroom to prosecute a complex case of financial misconduct. But what she uncovered pointed directly at the bench itself. Her unshakable resolve, armed with undeniable evidence and a calm command of the law, led not only to a confrontation but to the unthinkable, a sitting judge arrested in real time. This wasn't just legal drama. In a courtroom moment that felt more like a scene from a gripping legal drama than a real-life hearing, Judge Howard Gates, once untouchable, unflinching, and seemingly immune to consequence, was arrested in open court after a relentless crossfire of evidence presented by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. It was a moment that left the legal community stunned, political circles shaken, and the public invigorated by a rare sight: accountability in real time against a figure who had long weaponized the law from behind the bench. This was no ordinary courtroom conflict. It was the culmination of systemic corruption, institutional arrogance, and a power structure used to shielding itself. But it was also the triumph of strategic thinking, professionalism, and moral courage. A moment where integrity refused to be silenced. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win a legal argument. She shattered an illusion that judges are beyond reproach, even when they abuse their robes. From the opening moments of the hearing, Judge Gates made it abundantly clear. He didn't just disagree with Jasmine Crockett. He intended to humiliate her. Dismissive remarks, overt interruptions, sexist undertones, and a disdainful attitude painted the atmosphere. Gates wasn't simply questioning the validity of a case. He was mocking the very idea that a woman like Crockett, brilliant, composed, and unapologetically progressive, had the right to challenge entrenched power. His tone oozed condescension. "Shall we skip to the part where you waste my time with your theatrics?" That wasn't judicial skepticism. It was open contempt. And yet, Jasmine Crockett never raised her voice, never lost her composure. With each jab, she responded not with outrage but with evidence, building her argument brick by brick even as the judge tried to demolish it in real time. What Gates didn't anticipate, however, was that Crockett hadn't come unprepared. Far from it. She had receipts, literally, financial records, internal ledgers, and most damning of all, a document bearing his signature, authorizing questionable disbursements of state funds to the defendant in question, Charles Lawson, a well-connected developer. When confronted, Gates feigned procedural objections. "Inadmissible," he mumbled, suddenly not the booming voice of authority but a cornered man. But Crockett wasn't finished. She produced a recording, a covertly obtained audio clip in which Gates is heard saying, "Take care of it. Make sure she doesn't get her hands on those ledgers." That single line detonated years of trust and immunity. The courtroom, until then, simmering in tension, erupted. Lawyers gaped. Reporters fumbled for their cameras. The gallery buzzed like a shaken hive. The veil had been torn, and beneath it was a man who had used his gavel not as a symbol of justice, but as a tool of protection for criminal allies. When officers entered and walked directly toward the bench, the moment transcended legality. It became cultural. For the first time, a judge who had long operated above scrutiny was being held to the same standards as those he had judged, sentenced, and silenced. The arrest wasn't just procedural. It was poetic. Gates, once able to silence a room with a glance, was now speechless. His handcuffs clicked where once sat a gavel. The message was crystal clear. The law doesn't stop at the bench, and power doesn't grant immunity when truth comes knocking. Crockett's calm in that moment was chilling and powerful. She didn't gloat. Didn't monologue. She simply nodded, letting the evidence and justice speak for itself. This isn't merely a story about one corrupt judge and one courageous attorney. It's a mirror reflecting broader systemic issues deeply embedded in the fabric of our legal institutions. The arrest of Judge Howard Gates serves as a critical wake-up call that judicial power, if left unchecked, poses a real threat to justice and must be subject to rigorous oversight, just like other branches of government. Beyond the legal implications, the case highlights persistent gender and racial dynamics that continue to plague professional spaces, as seen in the way Crockett, a woman of color, a woman of color, was undermined through dismissive language and hostile courtroom behavior. Yet, in the face of this antagonism, Crockett demonstrated remarkable composure and unflinching resolve, embodying the kind of courage required to stand firm when truth is on the line. For many, witnessing a figure of authority held accountable in real time rekindled a long-dimmed belief in institutional integrity, not in its current state, but in its potential when challenged by those brave enough to demand better. With Gates behind bars and his connections exposed, the ripples are still spreading. Charles Lawson, the developer at the heart of the case, immediately began seeking protection in exchange for testimony, suggesting this rabbit hole may go far deeper than a single case. Political figures, judicial appointments, funding projects, all are likely now under scrutiny. Jasmine Crockett has made it clear, if we uncovered this, there's more. And the legal community is watching. So is the public. Whether or not Crockett intended to make history that day, she did. Not just by exposing a corrupt judge, but by modeling what principled leadership looks like. In a system often tilted toward the powerful, she reminded us that truth, when wielded with courage and care, can still shake the foundations of power, sessions, and perhaps most importantly, to young attorneys wondering if they can make a difference, to public servants wondering if integrity is worth the cost, and to every citizen who's ever felt the law as something done, not before formed them. Jasmine Crockett didn't just challenge a judge. She challenged a system to be better. And on that day, it listened. The story of Judge Howard Gates and Jasmine Crockett may feel rare, sensational even, but it is emblematic of the ongoing battle between accountability and arrogance, transparency and tradition, justice and manipulation. The courtroom may be a place of procedure, but it is also a theater of principle. And on this day, principle won. As Gates was led away and the courtroom slowly returned to order, one truth stood above all else. One truth stood above all else. So no one is above the law, not even the ones who wear its robes. Not even the ones who wear its robes. So as we close the chapter on this extraordinary courtroom moment, one thing is abundantly clear. Holding a corrupt judge accountable. It was about reclaiming the integrity of the system itself. In a world where justice often feels selective and power shields the guilty, this incident reminded us that courage, when paired with truth, can still break through even the most fortified institution. Judge Howard Gates may have worn the robe, but it was Crockett who upheld the law. Her calm defiance, strategic brilliance, and unshakable moral compass didn't just expose corruption. They inspired a new standard for accountability. Because at the end of the day, justice isn't served by those who hold power, it's protected by those brave enough to challenge it. Thanks for watching. If this moment moved you, share it, discuss it, and remember, real change begins when silence ends.